The Nvidia RTX 5080 is designed for 4K gaming on ultra settings in the most demanding games out there. But does it make sense to buy one for 1440p resolution, or is it an overkill? In this video, we'll find out. I will be putting the RTX 5080 to the test at 1440p resolution in different types of games. So in the end, you will know if you should pair the 5080 with a 1440p monitor, or maybe it's better to save your money and go with a lower tier GPU. By the way, the 5080 is out of stock everywhere by the time of filming, so if you want to get one, down in the video description I will leave gaming PCs with the 5080 that are actually in stock, so you can check those out for the latest pricing and availability. My name is Valentino. That being said, let's start. The first game is one of the most high demanding games out there in Cyberpunk 2077. We are testing everything on Ultra or Psycho when possible. No ray tracing enabled yet. I'm going to enable that in just a second. But basically in the top left corner you can see the FPS and FPS average. We are averaging over 100 FPS, which is insane for this type of game, especially considering that we are testing it on ultra settings. Remember, this is 1440p ultra or Psycho. This is one of the best looking settings, but now we are going to test the max settings that you can try in this game, which is ray tracing enabled, everything on ultra, Psycho mode for ray tracing, and path tracing enabled as well. And this is where the real test comes, and the 5080 is pulling around 50 FPS, which is honestly playable considering that you are using path tracing. Now, of course it's not 60 plus FPS, but still looks amazing, and after all, in my opinion, it's very playable. Now, if you turn off path tracing but you still turn on ray tracing, so you still have that ray tracing ultra reflections, then you are averaging around 80 FPS, which again, it's very high FPS considering we are playing Cyberpunk 2077, everything set to ultra. So yeah, Cyberpunk 2077 at 1440p will not be an issue unless you turn on path tracing, but I mean, if you turn on the DLSS quality while playing with path tracing, you will be averaging over 60 FPS, so even then you will have a smooth experience with the max settings enabled. The next game is another one of the most high demanding games that you can play. Arguably it's higher demanding than Cyberpunk 2077. This is Flight Simulator 2024, everything set to ultra 1440p max settings with the LAA enabled, so no DLSS, and we are averaging around 60 FPS, in some areas hitting over 70. To be fair, this is not the best optimized game out there, or simulator, however you want to call it. I will call it a game because I'm not a pilot and I'm not practicing, so I take it as a game. But anyway, as you can see, the 5080 at some points is utilizing over 90%, which is good, but at times it's dipping to 80% or even lower than that, and that's where the FPS dip as well. Now, in this simulator, 30 FPS is considered good. You can easily play at 30 FPS and lock it there. So we are averaging over 60 FPS, and if you lock it to 60, you will have a very nice experience. Now, I am in New York City, which is one of the most demanding maps. I believe it's the most demanding one actually. But as you can see, in some areas, the FPS is actually around 80, which is really good. And the GPU is not even utilizing 80% here. So the 5080 is capable of hitting well over 100, I would say, when utilizing at least 95%. And here I decided to turn on frame generation with the LAA, so no DLSS enabled. And the reason why I turn on frame generation is because it works pretty well in this game. I do believe that the image quality is pretty nice, and honestly, I can't tell the difference between frame generation on and frame generation off in this game, which is weird to say because in most games frame generation is not ideal. But anyway, with frame generation, the GPU is actually utilizing 90% or more. At some points it dips to 80% or so, but most of the time is around 90+%, which is good. And now we are averaging 150 FPS, which is an insane number considering we are on ultra settings and this game, which is very high demanding. So you can easily fit a high refresh rate monitor if you play with frame generation on, or even DLSS quality, honestly, or DLSS balanced, and have an amazing experience in this game. This is another map which is not as high demanding as New York City, and you can see that we are averaging around 80 FPS. This is ultra settings, no frame generation, no DLSS, everything set to the max settings. So 80 FPS is of course very high FPS for this type of game. I mean 60 FPS is ideal, so anything over is going to be top tier performance. But I have to say though, I'm definitely not a pilot, so yeah, I was having issues controlling the plane and well, it didn't end the best way, but let's move to a different game. And the next game is another very high demanding game in Black Myth Wukong. Now I am using the LAA, so no DLSS quality or anything like that. The graphic settings is set to cinematic, which is the highest settings. First, no ray tracing enabled, and we are averaging around 70 FPS, which is a very playable experience in this type of game. Again, this is a very high demanding game, so you are not really supposed to be playing at 140 FPS, although you can reach that if you turn on frame generation, but here we are testing the max settings. I'm not trying to turn on frame generation at this point because you actually don't need it unless you really want high frame rates in these high demanding titles. Now the thing that I'm going to turn on now is going to be ray tracing. Now if you turn on ray tracing ultra, then we are averaging around 40 FPS, which again, in my opinion, is playable in single player games. So it's not really a big issue. I do think that you can play with ray tracing max, but if you're going to turn on ray tracing, I actually recommend you turning on the DLSS quality because the level of performance is going to be quite higher and the image quality is actually amazing. I mean, for me, I can't tell the difference between the DLSS quality and native resolution, but maybe that's just me. Here we are averaging around 60 FPS, so much better than 40 FPS. Remember, we are playing with ray tracing max enabled, so this is very playable even with ray tracing on. Now let's move to Red Dead Redemption 2, which is a high demanding game. It's not the most demanding game out there, to be honest, but it's one of the best looking games out there, and I know that many people like it. So if you want to play this game with the RTX 5080 at 1440p maxed out settings, you will be averaging around 140 FPS, which is a high refresh rate experience. Remember, we don't have DLSS enabled or anything like that, so you can easily fit a 144 Hz 1440p monitor and take full advantage of it in this game, which is supposed to be a demanding game. I mean, again, this is not Fortnite or anything like that, so having more FPS, yes, I mean, it feels smoother, but it's not going to make a huge difference because this is a story game where you're not trying to compete, if that makes sense. But anyway, this game is very well optimized. The GPU is over 90% almost all the time, so very nice game. In my opinion, one of the best games in terms of graphics. And in case you wanted to see an easy to run game, this is Fortnite competitive settings, so DX12, view distance to far and everything else set to low. And yeah, I mean, the 5080 is not even using 60% of its power and we are averaging over 380 FPS, so feel free to go with a 360 Hz 1440p monitor. I mean, if you want to play performance mode, I feel that you can even reach 500 FPS and have a 480 Hz monitor, or if you turn on the DLSS. But if you want to take full advantage of the 5080 or at least utilize it more, just set everything to epic and then the GPU is going to be utilizing about 90%. We are averaging over 240 FPS and this is epic settings, which is insane. I mean, on epic settings, even 100 to 120 FPS is very smooth, so this is double the performance. And if you turn on TSR high, you are going to be averaging even higher frame rates, about 280 FPS on average. Again, insane considering that you are playing on epic settings. Let's be honest here, almost nobody plays on epic settings if you are going to compete. But if you wanted to compete, you can easily fit a 240 Hz monitor even on epic settings. Now, I was missing all my shots, I'm sorry about that. I've been really trash at this game for a long time now. But I mean, just to quickly show you how insane the 5080 is, playing Fortnite epic settings at 8K resolution, I was averaging over 100 FPS. So yeah, insane. Let me give you my final thoughts. Should you pair the RTX 5080 with a 1440p monitor, or should you actually save your money and go with a lower tier GPU? Well, I mean, the 5080 is an insane graphics card even for 4K resolution, so in my opinion, it depends. If you want to play the latest, most high demanding games and you want to turn on ray tracing or path tracing when available, I believe that the 5080 is actually a good option. Or maybe you want to play in a high refresh rate monitor and you want high FPS even in high demanding titles. In that case, getting a 5080 is going to be just fine. And honestly, who am I to tell you not to buy a 5080 for 1440p resolution? Now, if you will be playing games like Minecraft or Fortnite, and you want to play very easy to run games, maybe a game like GTA 5, then in that case, I do think that getting something like the RX 7800 XT, for example, or the RTX 4070 or 5070 that's coming out very soon is going to be a better option for you, or even lower tier GPUs, because you are playing very easy to run titles. But if you want to play high demanding games, by all means get the 5080 if you have the budget to and you don't mind spending that amount of money. You don't actually need to upgrade to 4K just because you have a 5080. And by the way, right now it's very hard to find in stock, and the price is insane for those 5080s that are in stock, so I do recommend you buying a Prebuilt PC if you want to get a gaming PC around the RTX 5080. So you will have the links to the best gaming PCs with the 5080 down below in the video description with the latest pricing and availability in case you want to buy this graphics card right now. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next one.